As a chaplain, you're often walking alongside people and being with them at their lowest of times. And I was talking to a man the other day who was telling me the catalogue of errors he'd made, the shame and regret he felt about the people he'd neglected in his life, absenting himself perhaps from those who needed him and loved him. And in this moment of sharing, sat in a cell. He started telling me about the letters that his family had written to him, and even his estranged wife. And you can see just that the talking and being heard and listened to is a powerful experience. And as I was preparing to leave, actually, something switched in him and he suddenly started adding on to our conversation all of the things he was hoping for in the future. Time with his grandson, for example. And it became a very poignant moment. I was stood there ready to leave. And he was listing all of these things he was looking forward to, teaching his grandson to go out in the kayak, to cycle, to fish. And it was very poignant because he'd only just been telling me that in the months leading up to being in prison, he had decided to end his life and he'd walked to a particular place and he'd had a change of heart and he broke down in tears, he said, and he walked away from that. And even though that catalogue of errors still continued, perhaps he looks back on that moment. And yet here he is sat in a prison cell talking to me. And it's such a privilege to hear people's stories and to be with them when they're facing what life throws at us, you know. There, but for the grace of God, go I. And as I was stood there listening to him, becoming more and more joy filled and hope filled for the future, hope springs eternal. I really want to just take him out in the boat and go fishing and all of these comments he was adding. I said to him, have you heard of the story of the prodigal son? And he said no. So I said a bit of the story. Now, I know human beings are not always up to living out these plans and receiving our lost sheep back into the fold. But he kept pointing to these letters from his family. So I could say with some confidence, and what happens when this man who has wasted all of his money and has really lived a ruinous life and realized the mistakes he's made and trudges back home. And his father is delighted to see him. And they have a feast, and he puts his cloak on him, puts a ring on his finger, and welcome home, son. It's a very powerful story. And it's an absolute privilege to be alongside people and to hear these stories of despair that somehow miraculously turn into hope before your eyes.